You absolutely should care about the Kawhi Clippers mess right now, because if owner money can find its way around the salary cap, the Pelicans are at a serious disadvantage. It's Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Pelicans. I'm your host, Jake Madison. The Kawhi Leonard Clippers scandal. I haven't talked about it on the show because, look, this is Locked On Pelicans. It's about the Pelicans. It needs to relate to the Pelicans. But the more I've really dove into this story, other than just its impact on the NBA, this matters very much for the New Orleans Pelicans, and you should absolutely care about it. I'm going to give you like two big reasons why in today's show, and then I'm actually going to give you a reason why, like, maybe we should actually want this. We should want this to happen. I know it's a little crazy. That's the third segment. Look, the latest ESPN reporting says the NBA nearly year-long investigation into the Clippers has not found evidence that Steve Ballmer directly fueled money to Kawhi Leonard through team sponsors to circumvent the salary cap. The investigation began after reporting from Pablo Torre finds out that Leonard received a 4-year, $28 million endorsement from Aspiration that allegedly required little or no promotional work. And then we found out that Ballmer invested $60 million into Aspiration. That's paying Kawhi Leonard $30 million of that to not show up. It is a little sketchy here. ESPN reports investigators have also examined Kawhi Leonard's relationship with other Clipper sponsors, including Daktronics, who created their video scoreboard, and whether the team crossed the line from simply introducing Leonard as sponsors, which, by the way, is allowed, to facilitating or influencing his endorsement agreements, which could constitute salary cap circumvention here. This is not the same thing as the Clippers being completely cleared. ESPN reports the NBA is still examining different things with it. The NBA has said, our investigation's not done, and there's inaccuracies in ESPN's reporting. Basically, this isn't wrapped up yet, though we're starting, it sounds like, to head to that sort of thing. So should you care, right? My question as I was kind of building out this show was, should Pelicans fans care? And I want to answer that in today's show. Yes, you should, because if the salary cap can be worked around, it's not just that small market teams are screwed. It's that owners who don't spend as much as others are completely screwed. And that's not the point of the NBA here. What's the point of having a salary cap? To create competitive balance if teams can potentially create additional compensation outside of it. That's essentially what this story is about. The part that I care about is the tree planting company Aspiration. I'm less concerned about the idea that the Clippers introduced Kawhi Leonard to sponsors. This whole thing with their scoreboard guys, Daktronics, don't care. Teams do this, right? That's allowed. It's in a sense encouraged here. The Pelicans have done versions of this themselves. Zatarans had the jersey patch sponsor back in 2017. DeMarcus Cousins appeared in all of their marketing. That kind of relationship is normal. Even after DeMarcus Cousins left New Orleans, this is funny. Zatarans went to him, was like, so you want out of this deal? He's like, no, you can still pay me and I'll still be in endorsements and stuff because we signed a contract that says it. So that's a totally normal thing. But what concerns me is when Steve Ballmer invests money into a company and that money then that company then gives the money to a star player, especially because Aspiration, the tree planting company, or whatever they do, green company, didn't really do anything. It looks like they're just a shell company to divvy up money and put it elsewhere here. So Ballmer personally invests major money, $60 million reportedly, into Aspiration. Aspiration then has a massive relationship with the Clippers. Kawhi receives a reported $28 million endorsement agreement with them and doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't automatically prove salary cap circumvention. You don't have that smoking gun when it comes to this. But man, the circumstantial evidence there is pretty damning, in my opinion. And that's where Pelicans fans should care. This is a competitive balance issue. Look, New Orleans isn't going to compete with Los Angeles or New York on pure market power, right? Look, it's a bigger market. There's more corporate opportunities. There's more national exposure, more endorsement possibilities, more entertainment connections, and so on. That's fine. If Nike wants to pay, it's New Balance, wants to pay Kawhi Leonard more because he plays in Los Angeles, the Pelicans New Orleans just has to live with that, right? But that's a big difference from the owner being like, I'm going to get this guy an extra $30 million to be on my team, right? That is an owner creating a financial advantage using their own money. And that shouldn't be allowed. I don't want to get into rich owner, less rich owner. They're all rich. Some are willing to spend, some are not willing to spend, right? It doesn't matter. Look, if you own an NBA team, and everyone's got to play by the same rules. Just because one person's richer than the other doesn't mean they can create advantages for them here. You could be the least wealthy NBA owner. I actually don't have the list in front of me, so I don't know who it is. And they should have the same advantages for the most part when it comes to what they individually are doing. Other sponsors, you know what? If they're not if there's no ties to the owner or things like that, I have no problem with that. That's where market matters, right? That's where your owner can kind of broker some things and make something happen, or teams can make things happen by introducing a player to that, right? The salary cap is supposed to ensure that Steve Ballmer can simply not pay more money to players than Gail Benson can. And when you look at this deal here, it seems like Steve Ballmer was trying to do that. If Ballmer can legally pay Kawhi Leonard the max, then put that money into another company and turns around and spends that, it looks like it's a second payroll here. And then, yes, you run into the problem of owners with the most money can pay to win, in a sense. The NBA, to some degree, should have pay to win. Higher payrolls tend to do better, right? Look at the that's true in sports. Look at the Los Angeles Dodgers. Highest payroll, winning a bunch of games, won 2 World Series, hopefully going to win a third. Look, if it's within the rules, that's fine. But it's when you get out of the rules, which this is, it creates a massive competitive imbalance. And that's not what you want. Look, let me use Trey Murphy as an example here. Imagine Trey Murphy becomes a legitimate star this year. And in a couple years, he's up for a new contract here. The Pelicans and every other team can offer him whatever the CBA allows. Let's call it a max. The Pelicans, having his bird rights, actually have a legal advantage because they can offer him a 5-year max versus a 4-year max that other teams can do. And since NBA contracts, generally max contracts are fully guaranteed, you're going to have him being able to say, I'm going to guarantee myself an extra $65 million, something along those lines. That's an advantage for the Pelicans. But say a Steve Ballmer or another owner comes in and goes, Trey Murphy will give you a 4-year deal. Pelicans can offer you 5, but we'll give you 4, but we'll find a way through one of our shell company, or not, we'll find a way. We will give you endorsement deals through our shell companies that we are investors in and get you that extra $65 million that you could get with New Orleans. Maybe Trey Murphy was leaning towards re-signing with New Orleans because of the bird rights advantage that the team has. That goes out the window now. What's the point of a salary cap or the collective bargaining agreement if that's the case here? It's one thing to say, we'll connect you with sponsors. Let's see what they can do. But that's not a guarantee. That's not the owner's money. That's a third party that you don't have full control over here. This negates the advantage of max contracts and other things like that to, I don't even want to say small market teams because it has nothing to do with that, right? It's just rich owner versus less rich owner, or owner that's willing to spend way more money or not. But it also, we'll get into the CBA part of it in a minute here because that's kind of the next step of this. That shouldn't be allowed. That puts a team like New Orleans at a disadvantage unless you're one of those teams with an owner that will just throw money at everything. And look, I just saw Peyton Watson get signed and traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers here. That broke right before I recorded the show because the Nuggets owner wants to be cheap. But what if they gave Peyton Watson a low contract, $10 million a year, and then themselves paid him money through a shell company? And you could have avoided this. They traded him because they don't want to pay the luxury tax and be that deep into the second apron. That's why they lost Peyton Watson. Their owner got cheap. But could there have been a way to keep him? Maybe. But that shouldn't be allowed. The collective bargaining agreement is designed to do that here. You don't need every NBA market to be equal. The Pelicans don't, right? But you do need every NBA team and every NBA owner. Again, I don't think this is actually big market versus small market. It's owner versus owner. You need every NBA owner to be operating under the same salary cap. And that's where, that aspiration deal becomes a legitimate question. But there is a collective bargaining agreement impact on this that I think is really important that should matter to you as a Pelicans fan. And I'll tell you why. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. We'll get into the owner aspect, by the way, of this in the third segment too.
The problem of finding clothes that you can live in all day, be comfortable, and do whatever you need to do, whether it's just chilling, going to meetings, playing golf, being on the move, that problem has been solved by Cozy Earth. The everyday polo is the answer. It's lightweight, built to move with you, just easy to wear everywhere. I've got it on right now, and it's fabulous. Plus, the Cozy Earth Essential Socks, they're exactly what the name suggests. Soft, supportive, comfortable enough that you stop thinking about them halfway through the day. Plus, Cozy Earth backs everything with a 10-year warranty and hassle-free returns. So if something isn't quite right, you're covered. That makes trying them for yourself an easy decision. I've got the Cozy Earth Everyday Polo in blue and in black. Check them out at CozyEarth.com. Use the code LOCKEDON for 20% off. That's right, Locked On for an exclusive 20% off. And if you see a post-purchase survey, please mention you heard about it right here, CozyEarth.com.
And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. And if you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. For your second listen, it's Locked On NBA with Wes, Matt, and Hayes, covering all the biggest stories across the NBA, the trade negotiations, the trades that go down, like Peyton Watson to the Denver Nuggets, from the Denver Nuggets to the Cleveland Cavaliers, and all the stuff that comes with that. They're covering it all over at the Locked On NBA podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Don't forget, you can also watch Locked On Pelicans on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, same place you watch your Pelicans play. We're there every single day at 10:30, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. All right, let's get into this one. I'm fired up about this one. I like doing the show. Again, look, tip to aspiring Pelicans podcasters. I get a lot of people who do reach out to, like, what should I do? All of these things. It's great. I'm happy to help people. If you're trying to, get into this space, whatever, reach out to me on social media is the easiest way. On Twitter, usually the easiest one. Happy to help out. One of the things I say is, if you're doing a show on the Pelicans, it's got to relate to the Pelicans. That's why Kawhi Leonard and the Clippers, you might not care about it, and that's fine. If I just spent time talking about that and not relating it to this team, you'd be less interested. But this matters for the Pelicans too. And that's why I want to really get into this here. The NBA, and this is where it really matters for the Pelicans, I think. The NBA can't make roster building brutally restrictive and then lose what counts as player compensation, because the more compensation you pay your players, you get into the luxury tax, you get into the first apron, you get into the second apron. And those are all designed to basically force you to tear down teams here, right? Think about how often we've talked about, I've got a list of topics here on this team. The luxury tax, apron thresholds, exceptions, being over the cap, not having cap space to spend, salary matching, right? Draft restrictions, stretching contract, all those things, right? Whether New Orleans can just basically take back a couple $1 million or not in some sort of trade, whether one move blocks another move here. That is not just, to the Pelicans, but something that matters for every single NBA team right now. Joe Dumars has to care about every dollar, especially if the Pelicans have kind of like the internal cap set at the luxury tax. But if you go into the first apron, you can't do as much. If you go into the second apron, where the Denver Nuggets are, you can do even less here, right? The Pelicans, might spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to clear a $7 million Jordan Hawkins, right? Or we would debate if it's smart or not for them to have signed DeAndre Jordan to a 2-year deal versus 1, because some of that is offset by the NBA. Then it would have counted less against the salary cap, because that every dollar matters when they're trying to figure out what to do. This is part of the reason why they've done like virtually nothing this offseason. The NBA has intentionally built the collective bargaining agreement to make wealthy teams essentially feel the consequence for spending too much. It's the whole point of this system here. So if that's going to matter, then you need to look at, potentially $30 million flowing to a player outside of the payroll as something that can be restrictive. Otherwise, no, this team, the Pelicans, and again, we'll get into the ownership aspect of this in a minute, are done. They're never going to be competitive here. You can't tell New Orleans, sorry, you're over, you've got to pay into the luxury tax now, or you're going to the first apron or second apron, which they'll never do. Then you lose this team building mechanism, whereas another franchise can create it's not just like the financial money of recruiting players to it. It's the flexibility it gives to execute trades. Not being in the second apron for the Nuggets would be a real good thing right now. A real good thing. Not being in the luxury tax for New Orleans. Look, maybe there's a 15. Benedict Matherin's a good example of this, actually. But say before they signed Trendon Watford, they have one roster spot. Hey, Ben, we're going to pay you $5 million a year. And then we'll flow money to you. Say, here's what they're 5.8 against the luxury tax, right? With Trendon Watford. Let's say that's what they are, and they have one open roster spot. We'll pay you $5.8 million. We know that's not what you're worth. You want more than that. And we will, through a shell company, we'll give you a racehorse or something like, or whatever it is. You can make promotional appearances there. And then that money that Gail that horse or whatever company it is that Gail Benson owns will give you another $15 million. So your total salary is about $21 million when you think about it here. Come sign for less. And that's how the Pelicans don't pay the luxury tax, but still get their guy. That's circumventing the salary cap here. Teams can't be allowed to do that. If the Pelicans aren't going to do this sort of thing, and not allowed to do it, other teams shouldn't be either. The Pelicans don't have enough money to go and get Benedict Mathurin right now, straight up. So it shouldn't be that other teams can kind of be like, these rules don't matter here, right? This is not about, again, sponsorships for players. Zatarans and DeMarcus Cousins, it's a good example of what you should be doing, right? If teams want to sponsor Zion, want to sponsor Trey, want Jeremiah Fears, you should make those connections and make that happen. This is an owner investing money in a company that looks like they literally did nothing, and then a bunch of that money going straight to the player. That kills the salary cap. That harms the aprons. That harms the luxury tax. That luxury tax that, that money all gets split. So when Kawhi's making $5 million less on the second deal that he signed with the Clippers, and that's what it is. He signed a full max his first deal, but the second contract was slightly below his max. $5 more million in there could have been like $30 million. That gets split with all the teams that don't pay the luxury tax. You as a Pelicans fan, because this team doesn't pay the luxury tax for better or worse, should want that money coming to New Orleans because it probably can help in some capacity here, right? Look, there are disadvantages here in New Orleans compared to Los Angeles, to New York, right? But you shouldn't also be competing with an owner's like personal investment portfolio, it feels like here. The natural things of the market, sure. It's what you got to deal with, right? That's all fair. That's part of this. But when an owner invests $60 million in a company that also pays players, that's not like the normal thing of this. And so that's why enforcing this and coming down hard on the Clippers, matters in this collective bargaining agreement. What's to stop the Dallas Mavericks, a division rival, from doing something like this if they know they're not going to get caught or get in trouble for it, even if they are caught? The Clippers were caught and maybe nothing's going to happen. What's to stop the San Antonio Spurs from basically building an unbeatable team that way? New Orleans is never going to be able to compete. And again, we'll get into the owner stuff in a minute here, but that's nothing to do with this. If one owner has less money than the other, as long as you got more than what the salary cap is and all of that, you're supposed to be fine. But this kind of eliminates all that. This really harms competitive balance. And you should be rooting for your owner. And no one wants to root for an owner here. So, if you're going to tell a team like the Pelicans that every dollar matters, then every dollar needs to matter for everybody here. And that's where this, I think, is something that it's like, should you care about this? Yeah, you really should here, right? But there's also at a point where you should almost applaud this, want this to happen, in that you shouldn't care about this. Let's flip this around. It's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by FanDuel. Baseball fans, you think you know who's hitting a homer today? FanDuel is giving you a free chance to call your shot with daily dingers. It's easy to play. Just make your free pick for who you think will hit a home run in their game, and if you're right, you're going to receive a profit boost to use on your next bet for a chance at extra winnings. And best of all, you can make a free pick every day throughout the MLB season, and daily dingers is another fun way to stay engaged with every day's games, whether you're following your favorite team or keeping an eye on matchups across the league. Every game has someone capable of going deep, and now you get the chance to make your prediction before first pitch. Sometimes it's a hitter who's been on a hot streak. Maybe you got a favorable pitching matchup, or you're even in a ballpark that tends to give up home runs. Those are always the first things you want to be looking for here before making your daily dingers pick. So are you ready to play your game today? Join all the action at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com to play daily dingers and make your free pick on who's hitting a homer. Play ball and swing for the fences on FanDuel, an official partner of the MLB. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. Make Locked On Saints with Ross Jackson covering everything out in California your second listen today. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm going to challenge the last two segments I said, where I said this should matter to you. And in a weird segment, this segment also is like, yes, this should matter to you here. I've said this is bad, and it is. It's bad overall. But also, I want to applaud Steve Ballmer a little bit. Like, I want to be like, you know what, buddy? Like, good job. I like this, in a sense. Because isn't on some level this exactly what you, a fan, would want? How often do all fan bases, this one included, complain our owner is cheap, spend more money, right? We know this. The Pelicans fans know this conversation. They're one of two franchises that have never paid the luxury tax. I don't know if there's ever been a team that's worthy of paying the luxury tax, but that's beyond the point here. You know, fans want ownership that's willing to like massively invest, pay the tax, spend on facility, hire better scouting departments, more front office people, invest in analytics, build a great player development program, right? Make your organization attractive to stars by taking care of their families. Use every advantage available to you. Steve Ballmer is the exact opposite of a cheap NBA owner. His attitude, truthfully, seems to be money is not going to be the reason the Clippers fail. I dig it, right? Like there's something to applaud about that sort of thing. Let me ask you this. If Gail Benson could create could legally create an environment where playing in New Orleans resulted in players making millions more, would you complain at all about this? Like, of course not, right? So I want to see this team doing more stuff like this. And in a sense, Ballmer being like, I want to pay Kawhi Leonard more, and I can only pay him so much because there is a max deal. Let me find a way to pay him more. I kind of like it. I kind of like it a lot, truthfully, when you hear that. Is that like actually good ownership here? And I think in a sense, like it is. This is an owner that's looking for ways to make his team more attractive and successful and make his star players happy. It's hard to fault him, right? Again, there is a distinction here of like, it's bad for the league as a whole, but like if this was like I'm putting that in air quotes, my owner, if I were a Clipper fan, I'd be like, this dude rocks. Like, I love this guy, right? He's invested heavily in the fan experience, building the Intuit Dome and trying to create literally one of the best fan experiences across the league. He'd pay his players more money if he could. He's got the cash, so he would if he could. He's just not allowed to, and he wants to find a way to do it. What are we mad about here, right? You know, in a sense, I think. But you don't quite get that in New Orleans. You don't. Look, Gail Benson's not on the same level as Steve Ballmer is for a variety of reasons that we don't need to go into that don't matter here. But that's why the CBA matters. There's very few people on the same level as Steve Ballmer, right? The Cronkies who own the Nuggets, the Rams, the Avalanche, I think they own Arsenal too, are not on the same level as Steve Ballmer. That's why they just lost Peyton Watson and are kind of wasting Nikola Jokic's prime when they have like a top 5 guy, like near like a top 20 all-time guy. And they're being It's kind of cheap because they don't want to be in the second apron and paying more. When they could just spend the cash. It's like $200 million. The Warriors owners did it for a while. They were just doing it legally and into the luxury tax and being like, all right, we'll just spend. That's okay. Do that. Ballmer, though, wants to do that, but also wants to be kind of smart about it and save some money against the luxury tax, which is kind of smart because then you're not giving other teams that money here. So maybe Pelicans fans shouldn't be angry at Ballmer trying to maximize every advantage here. Maybe they should kind of respect that here, and I'm sure they all want more. I know you all do want more from ownership to invest in the team to that degree here. And so in a bunch of senses, yeah, you should really care about this. It matters. In this sense, no, you shouldn't, but also, yeah, you should, because I don't know, I kind of want every owner to be like this in a sense, spend the money here. I also, if you're looking for you shouldn't care about this. When you look at the Pelicans' problems, it has nothing to do with anything related to the Clippers in this situation. The Pelicans' issues have nothing to do with what's going on with aspiration, with Kawhi Leonard, with Steve Ballmer, or anything like that here. But don't lose. I encourage you to kind of look at the other side of this and be like, maybe in a weird way, this is good. Or Ballmer just could have paid him more money, could have given him the $5 million more, and that's that. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you actually think good for you, Steve Ballmer? I kind of do, even though I think it's bad for the league and particularly the Pelicans as a whole, because they don't have an owner on Steve Ballmer's level. That's a fact. We'll see what ends up happening. I'm really curious how this comes down in the league and what it may or may not impact. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter. Be back with y'all tomorrow.